Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a researcher, a scientist, or an academic who got into your field because you genuinely wanted to discover the unknown, but right now you're just finding yourself suffocating under the weight of these incredibly rigid institutional expectations, well, you are exactly in the right place. Consider me your mentor for the next few minutes. Today, we're taking a hard look at the realities of modern science. We'll be drawing on some amazing insights from cognitive neuroscientist Julia Mossbridge, and we're going to map out exactly how to survive the academic machine without losing your intellectual soul.
So I want you to really think about this. Have we engineered the wonder out of science? Seriously, ask yourself, does the academic system you operate in prioritize safe, predictable bets over genuine, unpredictable curiosity? Because, so many brilliant minds enter science to explore the absolute edges of reality, only to find themselves trapped in a system that literally punishes them for stepping out of line. Let's look at exactly how this happens, and far more importantly, how you can overcome it.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the death of wonder.
True discovery is inherently messy. It's really all about wandering out into the dark. But the rigid expectations forced upon early career researchers today, they basically demand that you already know what's in the dark before you even turn on the flashlight. It's crazy. Let's dive into an incredible comparison to really illustrate this. Dr. Mossbridge shared this brilliant little anecdote about her high school biology teacher. The teacher had the class go outside and write down 2 questions about their environment. One question they thought Albert Einstein would ask, and one question a 2-year-old would ask. And at the end of the exercise, the teacher revealed the lesson. Einstein was actually the 2-year-old. His mind was just full of wonder, confusion, and complete uncertainty. He just asked fundamental questions and imagined things. But, as you probably know all too well, that mindset is rarely rewarded in a university setting today.
Because, at its core, science is about discovery, which means it is about not knowing. If you've been feeling frustrated by this, I want to validate that feeling for you right now. Acknowledging what we just don't understand is literally the very foundation of scientific inquiry. Yet, here we are, operating in an environment that demands absolute certainty from us at all times.
Moving on to Section 2, the academic career trap.
Let's transition over to the somewhat harsh reality of modern academic structures. We really need to dissect how the system systematically crushes that childlike Einstein-esque wonder we just talked about. Think about the backward absurdity of modern academic funding for a second. The grant process places this immense pressure on following a strictly predetermined line of thinking. It's like you essentially have to do 3/4 of your research before you even apply for the grant. That way, the moment the funding finally arrives, you can immediately publish those safe, expected papers. Let's be real, you aren't discovering anything new there, you're just packaging what you already know, while pretending you haven't looked at it yet.
And this whole process creates what we can call the bureaucratic scientist. This is a researcher who basically survives by writing grants for established facts rather than ever risking failure on the unknown. And it's these immense career pressures that enforce this compliance. Think about it. If you deviate, if your funding totally depends on following a specific, acceptable narrative, well, you're just not going to pursue the actual mysteries of the universe, because doing so would be extremely detrimental to your own career. It's a massive trap.
This brings us to Section 3, the courage to be foolish.
Okay, now we really have to address the elephant in the room. That paralyzing fear of looking silly, or the sheer dread of studying something considered fringe by your peers. When Julia Mossbridge was navigating her early career, and keep in mind, she's got degrees from top-tier institutions like Northwestern and UCSF, she was actually politely told by wonderful people who genuinely wanted to support her, if you took this psychic stuff off your resume, you'd have a perfectly good resume for academia. And her response? Are you crazy? This is the stuff that's actually interesting. But she was literally advised to hide her unconventional research just to maintain this pristine, safe academic image.
It's wild, right? Because certain topics carry massive stigmas in our field. Things like UFOs, cryptids, precognition, or exceptional human performance. But as our sources point out, we really have to disarm the stigma around these so-called foolish topics. Being inherently curious about anomalous phenomena should absolutely not be a career death sentence. As a researcher, you shouldn't be afraid to look like a fool in the eyes of orthodoxy, especially if it means you are genuinely pursuing the truth.
Because when you dig into this, you hit a very toxic wall. Let's define what we mean by the cult of academia. It is an environment heavily marked by intellectual gatekeeping, the constant threat of excommunication, and just this extreme performative adherence to doctrine. Our sources actually compare this directly to cult behavior. If you say the wrong words, or if you dare to ask an inappropriate question, you are ousted. Everyone is acting performative, constantly trying to prove they are more in line with the accepted doctrine than the next person. And honestly, it is profoundly disturbing when the very people who are supposed to be the open-minded truth seekers become the primary gatekeepers. All right, Section 4. Ego, intellect, and personalities. To actually survive the academic machine, you absolutely have to know how to navigate brilliant but incredibly difficult or arrogant people. The human problem in science is essentially a giant wall of ego blocking the gathering of new information. It happens all the time. Insecurity masquerades as intellectual dominance. So many experts out there want total reverence, right? They want people to defer to them wholly without a single question, as if the science on a deeply complex subject is entirely settled. And that behavior just completely shuts down open conversation and genuine deep listening. And this brings us to a really vital survival skill: separating the messenger from the message. Mossbridge recounts attending this brilliant talk by a Nobel laureate at UCSF, who was just incredibly arrogant and unnecessarily rude to the audience. But her mentor pulled her aside and told her, "You have to learn to separate the personality from the information." Now, obviously, it's completely valid to want to set boundaries and not surround yourself with abusive egos. But as a scientist, you've got to develop the ability to extract the valuable data, the core message, even if the messenger delivering it is completely abrasive and insufferable.
And conversely, you really must avoid becoming that person yourself. Beware of the trap summarized in this mindset of saying, well, I am a PhD in this subject, so let me tell you what is going on. Look, do not assert intellectual dominance just to win some verbal chess game. You've got to maintain your humility. Practice deep, genuinely curious listening. Because remember, true communication requires establishing that you are just two people trying to understand something complex together, not an enforcer of a narrative demanding everyone's submission.
Finally, Section 5. Embracing true scientific discovery.
Let's shift gears here to some actual empowerment. How do you practically put all of this into action so you can thrive, but with your intellectual soul intact? Well, because academia can take literal decades to accept new ideas, spending 10 years wondering if it's true and another 20 wondering if it's even useful, true discoverers often just have to step outside. You might keep one foot in the academic world, sure, but you have to put your other foot in building things completely outside the system. You've got to apply your theories, create tools, and investigate the unknown in the private sector or through independent builds. Because honestly, that is where speed and actual, real innovation happen.
So here is your mentor's survival guide. I want you to keep this checklist in the back of your mind. First, embrace the unknown. Remember that 2-year-old Einstein. Second, tolerate looking foolish. It usually just means you're asking the brave questions. Third, separate the data from the egos of the people delivering it. Fourth, maintain your own humility and be a relentless listener. And finally, when the institution starts to slow you down, go build outside the system.
I want to leave you with this one provocative thought today. What unconventional, foolish idea are you going to boldly explore tomorrow? Seriously, don't let the cult of academia or the fear of a bruised ego dictate your limits. The world desperately needs the weird, the curious, and the brave. So go be foolish. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.